Greetings, dear friends. Today we will talk not just about an interesting topic, but I would say a vital one for every person. We exist in a world of images, in the world of fantasy, a world of illusion, literally. All we see around us are images, all kinds of pictures, landscapes. Everything that surrounds us is an image. Pictures in our head, in our dreams, in our fantasies, they are all images. Our body is the external picture of our image. Why are we talking about the power of images today? Because today, images control the behavior of all people on our planet, with very few exceptions. Less than 1% of people are really free in their decisions and their actions. What is behavior? It is a series of actions that we perform every second. So every action of each person today begins with an image, the image that you hold your attention to. Do you doubt it? Here is an example. You are sitting, working, or watching a movie, and suddenly an image flashes in your mind, an image of a son, daughter, mother, or acquaintance. And then a thought appears. I wanted to call, to warn, to remind of something, or to clarify. I need to call. And here comes the anxiety, so you pick up the phone and start calling. But it all started with an image. Or you looked out of the window. You saw a flowering tree, a lawn, and pulled up a memory of last year's vacation, in the form of a series of beautiful pictures. A thought arises where to go this year. You got a pleasant emotion. You go to the computer and start browsing through sites with suggestions on the subject. You have planned a meeting, a trip, a walk, or a trip to the store. It doesn't matter. The first things that pop up in your head are images. You'll have pictures flashed in your head, forming an expectation of how things are going to happen, what you will look like, what you will say, what you will be told, what the place where you are going will look like. Everything that relates to the upcoming event will unfold in your head as a stream of images. Then it won't be like that, it's always wrong. But it starts with this. Do you still have doubts? Then sit down, close your eyes, relax, and try not to think about anything. The first thing you'll see is a flood of images, and a nine stream that you can't get rid of. As soon as you focus your attention on one of them, you're sucked into the stream of thoughts about that image. Sit and observe, and you'll realize that you do not control this process. So the algorithm of action formation is as follows: image, thought, emotion, reaction in the body, action. But what triggers this whole algorithm is your attention. It's like a computer, a mass of advertising pictures. As long as you don't hover your cursor over one of them, they're just pictures that fly by. But as soon as you put your cursor over them, information about the picture starts pouring out. Where, what, when you can buy. The cursor that triggers the algorithm for action is human attention. There are a lot of pictures around us, and we have a continuous stream of images in our head. As soon as you stop your attention at one of them, a stream of thoughts appears which corresponds to this image. And depending on what thoughts you agree with, such will be the emotions, and so will be your mood. For example, a mom is going to wake her children up in the morning. On the way to the children's room, an image of their sweet, sleeping faces pops up in her head. She imagines how tenderly she begins to stroke her babies, gently whisper something in their ear, and kick them gently, playing so that the children gradually wake up. And this will cause warm feelings and pleasant emotions. But there may also be another image, memory. For example, how the kids do not want to wake up for a long time, and she has to go into the room a few times, how the kids are fooling around in the bath, how long it takes them to pull on their clothes. Then there are those traffic jams. I will definitely be late. After these images and thoughts, Mom will walk into the room with a different set of emotions. Thoughts are always different, but they are mainly negative. That's how our consciousness works. It's very easy to see that. We only have 4 emotions: fear, aggression, sadness, and euphoria. Over 80% of emotions are negative. Only one is the equivalent of joy. Emotions are a consequence of thoughts. Since most emotions are negative, most thoughts are negative as well. Just think back or observe. How often are you in high spirits and how long do you stay in such a mood? Do you see a lot of happy people on the street? Your friends, relatives, acquaintances, colleagues. Watch them. What information do they mainly share? How do they evaluate other people and themselves? And you'll see that negative emotions, negative attitudes towards each other prevail. There are several important points in the action generation scheme. Remember, as soon as you look at a picture, it becomes a trigger for your next action. Emotion is always a consequence of the thoughts in your head that you agreed to. You are not at a person's action. You are upset not because the situation is the way it is, but because you choose to evaluate a certain person or situation in a certain way. Emotions trigger a whole chain of chemical reactions in the body. They start releasing different substances into the bloodstream, for instance, hormones. Everyone knows very well which hormones are released to certain emotions. Fear and aggression always come together. They produce adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol. When we like something, when we experience pleasure, dopamine is released. Good, joyful, and elated mood produces serotonin. Euphoria is maintained by dopamine and serotonin. We all know this very well because we are told a lot that our mood, our emotions depend on whether we have enough of a chemical substance in our body or not, if we have the right amount of specific hormones or not. However, all experience in psychiatry confirms the invalidity of the statement that chemistry is primary in the brain and determines a person's mental state. All mental illnesses are chronic in nature. This means that they are not curable. Treatment with chemistry with drugs leads to the person's degradation and painful death. Why does such a situation occur? Because the cause of the diseases is misidentified. The cause is not an imbalance of chemicals in the brain, but a misunderstanding of who a person is. What is a person's personality? What is consciousness? How are they related to each other? And what tools does the personality have to manage its state and prevent itself from becoming mentally ill? I didn't misspell it. Everyone is perfectly capable of maintaining self-control in any situation, and certainly of not driving oneself into mental disorder. And you don't need a doctor for that. Depression is a vivid example of how invalid this statement is. An imbalance of brain chemistry is the cause of mental illness. One of the symptoms of depression is a permanently low mood. What boosts the mood? Serotonin. The action of most antidepressants is based on keeping a certain level of serotonin in the brain. Medications, however, don't solve the problem. Depression is one of the main conditions leading to suicide today. There may be a temporary effect of improvement as long as a person takes the medication. But very often, this effect is weak, temporary, or even absent at all. What does a depressed person do? All his time, all his attention is focused on the image of oneself, miserable, misunderstood, and unwanted. The person is overwhelmed with thoughts of the injustice in the world and hopelessness of his situation. He is constantly absorbed in thoughts, blaming oneself and other people. These thoughts and images keep him in a constant state of fear, aggression, and sadness. Accordingly, his adrenaline, cortisol, and norepinephrine levels are high and serotonin production is reduced. Therefore, the doses of antidepressants have to be constantly increased and by no means cancelled. The cause of depression is focusing on selfish thoughts about oneself and complaints about everything and everyone. In fact, antidepressants cause a more interesting effect that is not written or talked about. They limit, block the brain's ability to accept images and negative thoughts that cause a depressed mood. And this is a more important part of their action, because it's connected to the cause of this condition. However, this effect is temporary. Let's take a more simple example. Any person's mood can drop. You can increase your serotonin level by eating a chocolate bar, a cake, or a banana. Will that improve your mood? Yes, but if you go to the mirror, look at your reflection in it, and listen to the thought, I must be an idiot to eat that cake again. I don't fit into anything. And that's it, you won't be in a good mood anymore. What caused serotonin levels to drop? The image I was looking at and the thoughts evaluating that image which I agreed with. But I could have chosen a different thought by looking at my reflection. What a beauty. The bigger the cushion, the sweeter the pushing. And the serotonin level wouldn't have dropped, your mood wouldn't have dropped, and there would have been more of dopamine. The release of certain hormones in the brain is a consequence of the experienced emotions, not vice versa. There are endless examples of the power of images over our emotional state. But what is important to understand is that our brain reacts in the exact same way to what we do in reality, to what we imagine, to what we fantasize about, to what we see in our dreams or when we observe someone else's actions. It doesn't matter if we are watching a real person or a character on TV. The chemical reactions in the brain and the reactions and sensations in the body will be the same. And this is a very interesting fact. Our brain does not distinguish between illusion, fantasy, and what we call reality. Let's take the loss of a loved one. Everyone knows this feeling, these emotions at a funeral. Several months or even years have passed, but if you just remember the person, the memory comes in the form of an image. This is where he used to sit. This is how he laughed. This was his favorite cap. Here you met him for the first time. Only one thought, I won't see him again. Your eyes fill with tears, your mood is ruined. This person died once, but his image and thoughts about him can plunge you into this suffering as many times as you like. So, here is behavioral management through images. But images do not simply determine human behavior, they form stereotypes of behavior through the anchoring of repetitive emotional reactions and sensations in the body. And dopamine's role here is not insignificant. Dopamine is produced as a confirmation of the pleasure we get. And what do people usually get pleasure from? The highest levels of dopamine are reached when we eat and have sex. Dopamine levels increase when we feel superiority over someone, or the importance that we were able to demonstrate on a physical or intellectual level. Fantasizing while lying on the couch, watching soap operas, entertainment shows, or action movies is also anchored by dopamine as a pleasure. Alcohol consumption and the anticipation from the possibility to drink alcohol is also supported by the release of dopamine. Alcohol is the most neurotoxic poison. Dopamine anchors the killing of a person as a pleasure. But dopamine doesn't encourage studying, washing dishes, cleaning, altruism, or learning something new. It's time to ask yourself a question of what we get pleasure from, and who inside us gets this pleasure. Because everyone has an experience of joy and pleasure when they have done something nice, kind, and helpful for other people. Have you noticed that these are different pleasures? Pleasures that are anchored by the release of dopamine most often take away our life. while genuinely kind human actions give us states of real happiness and sustain our life. And the brain is calm at this moment. There is no emotion in it. Kindness is not an emotion. Real happiness is not an emotion. And they are not dependent on hormones. But what's interesting is enough to think about impending pleasure to produce dopamine. It is produced in anticipation of pleasure. And what is anticipation of pleasure? It is the anticipation of how it will turn out. It is the images and thoughts in our heads. It is the work of consciousness. And how do we know that we are enjoying ourselves now? We've got a thought in our head. Cool, this is exactly what I need. It may sound in different variants. It's not a girl, it's just a buzzkill. Instead of a girl, it could be a car, a restaurant, an action movie. There is a thought. The thought that anchors that this action is exactly what is needed. Thoughts are the work of consciousness. Does a person need to turn into an alcoholic, a drug addict, a gambler, or a slacker fantasist? Do we really become happy when wasting our lives in an endless race for a new car, house, or clothes? Does the fantasist on the couch become happy? Remember Oblomov. Another trap is the adrenaline high, the rush of strong emotions which a person gets by experiencing stress. Who benefits from that? To tempt a person to risk his life? To tempt a person to risk his life to satisfy his pride? Any stress is a premature destruction and accelerated aging of the body. Does a person benefit from it? And we are told that this is how our brain functions as a result of evolution. That is, as a result of evolution, it began to work against us, to our detriment. And billions of people today succumb to the manipulation called dopamine high, adrenaline high. But the real high is entirely something else.
But then again, what does the word cave mean? And here we are faced with what? Again, with that very description from the perspective of psychology,
medicine even.
medicine and everything else, and just different interpretations in the dictionaries. It is taking drugs, it is pleasant inaction, it is idleness, let's say in delight, and so on. While in reality, as far back as in pre-Quranic times, in the territories where the Quran originated, the word cave meant bliss in God. That is, dwelling of a man in heaven. It was the word cave, or now it is interpreted as ultimate high. So God is a sheer pleasure.
What I would like to point out, I have already said that the brain does not distinguish whether we commit an action in our thoughts, in reality, or together with the main character of a movie who we associate ourselves with. We commit the action that we observe, that we fantasize about, that we dream about. Now remember what movies and TV shows you watch, what computer games you play, how much evil, violence, murder the main characters commit, characters who you associate yourself with. Remember how you laugh and cry as you watch, how your heart races and clenches with fear, how your whole body tenses. Your body confirms that you are doing all the things you are watching. Ask yourself, do I really want to do this? Am I ready to be responsible for my actions? Remember that the images we pay our attention to shape our behavior, directly affecting our attitude toward ourselves and the people who are with us.